The radio signals from Earth had been traveling through space for over 200 years when the Zephyrian Empire first detected them. War Prime Velthak stood in the command center of his flagship, watching his scientists analyze the strange transmissions from the small blue planet in the outer spiral arm. The signals showed images of creatures that walked on two legs, had soft pink skin, and seemed to break easily when they fell down or got hurt. The Zephyrian scientists worked for months studying every piece of information they could find about these humans. They watched their entertainment programs that showed people getting injured from simple falls. They examined their medical records that revealed how easily their bones broke and how short their lives were compared to other species. They studied their history and saw nothing but endless wars between their own kind. The evidence was clear to every Zephyrian analyst. Humans were weak, fragile, and spent most of their time fighting each other instead of working together. War Prime Velthak felt confident as he prepared his fleet. His empire had conquered 47 worlds, and most species either surrendered immediately when they saw Zephyrian ships or were defeated within days. These humans would be no different. In fact, they might be the easiest conquest yet. Their weapons were primitive, their ships were slow, and they could not even unite their own planet under one government. The War Prime decided that 3 dreadnoughts would be more than enough to make them surrender. Meanwhile, Commander Jake Morrison was conducting routine surveys near the Kepler 442 system aboard the exploration vessel UES Horizon. His crew was mapping asteroid fields and checking for mineral deposits when their communications officer picked up an unusual signal. The transmission was unlike anything in human databases, clearly artificial but following no known pattern. Morrison ordered his team to record everything and try to decode the message. Within hours, 3 massive ships appeared on their sensors. Each vessel was over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could destroy Morrison's ship with a single shot. The lead ship transmitted a message in perfect English which surprised the human crew. How had these aliens learned their language so quickly? War Prime Velthak appeared on their main screen, his reptilian features and glowing red eyes making several crew members step back involuntarily. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had delivered this speech many times before. He told Morrison that the Zephyrian Empire now claimed this entire region of space, including the human homeworld. Humanity had 2 choices: become a servant, species and work for their new masters, or face complete destruction. The alien commander explained that his scientists had studied humans thoroughly. He knew they were weak creatures with short lives who spent most of their time fighting among themselves. Their bones broke easily, their skin could be damaged by their own star's light, and they needed constant supplies of food and water to survive. No species this fragile could possibly resist the might of the Zephyrian Empire. Captain Lisa Martinez, Morrison's second-in-command, noticed something odd about the alien's speech. Velthak seemed genuinely puzzled when the human crew did not immediately accept his demands. He kept repeating facts about human weakness, as if he could not understand why they were not surrendering. Martinez realized that the aliens had never encountered a species that refused to give up after seeing their superior firepower. Morrison knew he was completely outgunned, but he also understood that panic would not help his crew or his species. He told Velthak that humans would need time to consider such an important decision. The War Prime seemed confused by this request, but agreed to escort the human ship back to Earth so Morrison could deliver the ultimatum to his government. As the Horizon traveled back toward Earth under alien escort, Morrison secretly transmitted everything to Fleet Command using a coded signal hidden in routine navigation data. He made sure to include detailed scans of the alien ships, their weapons, and most importantly, recordings of Velthak's statements about human weakness. If humanity was going to face extinction, at least they would know what they were up against. The journey took 3 weeks, during which the Zephyrian ships demonstrated their technological superiority at every opportunity. They could travel faster than any human vessel, their shields could deflect anything in the human arsenal, and their weapons could crack a planet's surface. War Prime Veltak used the time to study more human transmissions, becoming even more convinced that this would be the easiest conquest in his empire's history. When Earth appeared on their screens, Veltak saw a world divided into hundreds of different nations, with orbital stations that looked like construction projects rather than military bases. The planet's defenses consisted of a few dozen ships that were smaller than his escort fighters. He gave Morrison one standard week to return with humanity's surrender. The War Prime was so confident of victory that he did not even bother to establish a blockade. Why would these weak creatures try to run when they had nowhere to go? Morrison's ship docked at Luna Station, and within minutes, he was in direct communication with Admiral Ryan Clark at Fleet Command. As Morrison delivered his report, Clark realized that humanity faced its greatest challenge. But he also noticed something that the aliens had missed. They had given humans exactly what they needed most: time to prepare and an enemy that underestimated them completely. Admiral Ryan Clark stood in the command center at Fleet Headquarters, watching the tactical display that showed the positions of every human ship, station, and colony in known space. The red dots representing Zephyrian vessels sat ominously in Earth's outer system, waiting for humanity's answer. Clark had been in the military for 35 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Humanity faced an enemy with superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and the experience of conquering dozens of worlds. The Admiral's first challenge was immediate. Human colonies and mining stations scattered across 12 star systems were completely defenseless against Zephyrian attack. Most colony ships had been converted cargo vessels with minimal weapons, designed to carry families and equipment to new worlds rather than fight wars. The mining stations were even worse off, equipped only with industrial tools and basic life support systems. If the aliens decided to attack these settlements, thousands of civilians would die before any help could arrive. Clark began issuing orders that would change the course of human history. Every military vessel, from massive battleships to tiny patrol craft, received new assignments. Cargo ships loading supplies for distant colonies were redirected to carry weapons and defensive equipment instead. Mining companies found their contracts suddenly changed to prioritize materials needed for ship construction and military hardware. The entire human economy began shifting toward war production in a matter of days. Dr. Amanda Ross received an urgent summons from Fleet Command just as she was finishing her morning research on deep space ecology. As Earth's leading expert on alien life forms, she had been studying the limited data available about non-human species for over a decade. Now she found herself analyzing the most important alien contact in human history. Ross spent sleepless nights reviewing every second of Morrison's recordings, looking for clues about Zephyrian psychology and capabilities. What Ross discovered changed everything. The aliens had made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. Every species the Zephyrians had previously conquered fell into clear categories. Some were highly intelligent but physically weak. Others were strong but slow to adapt to new situations. None had possessed the combination of traits that made humans unique among known species. Ross realized that the aliens had no experience fighting a species that could think creatively under pressure while also adapting quickly to new challenges. The Zephyrian fleet remained in Earth's outer system, making no hostile moves but clearly demonstrating their power. War Prime Veltak sent daily messages demanding to know when humanity would surrender. His communications revealed growing impatience and confusion about why humans needed time to accept what he saw as an obvious conclusion. The alien commander could not understand why any species would hesitate to submit when faced with superior force. Captain Steve Collins commanded the mining station at Titan Base, one of humanity's largest operations in the outer solar system. When he received Clark's orders to prepare for possible evacuation, Collins made a different decision. Instead of running, he began converting his industrial equipment into weapons. Mining lasers designed to cut through asteroids could easily slice through ship hulls. Construction mechs built for moving heavy equipment could be modified to carry missile launchers. His crew of miners and engineers threw themselves into the work with desperate energy. Similar preparations were happening throughout human space. On Mars, weapons factories that had been idle since the last corporate war began producing ammunition around the clock. Asteroid mining crews started gathering materials that could be used to build improvised warships. Even civilian passenger ships received hasty modifications, adding armor plating and whatever weapons their crews could install. Humanity was transforming itself from a peaceful trading civilization into something else entirely. The Zephyrians intercepted some of these communications and preparations, but they dismissed everything as desperate gestures by a species that knew it was doomed. Their intelligence reports indicated that humans had never fought a proper space war and lacked the discipline necessary for coordinated military action. War Prime Velthak reviewed the data and concluded that these frantic activities only proved how panicked and disorganized the humans had become. Dr. Ross made another crucial discovery while studying Zephyrian battle records from their previous conquests. The aliens always fought the same way. They would arrive at a world with overwhelming force, demand surrender, and then either accept submission or destroy all resistance within a few days. Their entire military doctrine was based on quick, decisive victories that broke enemy morale before any real fighting could begin. They had never faced an extended campaign against an enemy that refused to give up. Admiral Clark realized that humanity's greatest advantage was not any single weapon or technology, but something the aliens could never have predicted: the refusal to surrender. Every human colony, station, and ship received the same message. If the Zephyrians attacked, fight back with everything available. Do not surrender. Do not retreat. Make them pay for every meter of space they tried to take. The week deadline was approaching, and Clark knew that his answer would determine the fate of his species. Humanity had used the time to prepare as much as possible, but their preparations looked pitiful compared to Zephyrian strength. 3 dreadnoughts sat in Earth's outer system, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. Behind them, intelligence suggested, lay an empire with thousands of ships and the resources of dozens of conquered worlds. But Clark had noticed something that gave him hope. The aliens were so confident of victory that they had made no effort to scout human defenses or gather current intelligence. They were basing their entire strategy on old data and assumptions about human weakness. War Prime Velthak had no idea that his week of waiting had given humanity time to become something different, something that had never existed before in the galaxy, an entire species preparing for total war. As the deadline approached, Clark prepared his response to the Zephyrian ultimatum. His message would be simple and clear, but it would also be the beginning of the most important conflict in human history. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of, but they were about to learn how wrong they could be. War Prime Velthak received Admiral Clark's response exactly 1 week after delivering his ultimatum. The human message was brief and direct. Humanity rejected Zephyrian demands and would defend their territory with all available force. Velthak stared at the transmission in disbelief. In 47 previous conquests, no species had ever refused surrender when faced with such overwhelming odds. These humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and the War Prime was certain it was the latter. The alien commander wasted no time in demonstrating the consequences of human defiance. His fleet moved toward the outer colonies, beginning with New Geneva, a mining settlement with barely 2,000 inhabitants. Velthak expected the colonists to surrender immediately when they saw his ships approaching. Instead, Commander Nina Williams, the settlement's security chief, activated defense protocols that had been hastily prepared during the past week. The Zephyrians had never encountered anything like what happened next. Instead of a traditional military defense, the humans turned their entire colony into a weapon. Mining tunnels became ambush points where human fighters could attack and disappear. Industrial facilities were rigged with explosives that could take out landing parties. Even civilian areas were prepared with hidden weapon caches and escape routes that allowed defenders to strike from unexpected directions. Williams had studied every piece of available data about Zephyrian tactics during the preparation week. The aliens always used the same approach: land overwhelming force at strategic points, capture key facilities, and force quick surrender through shock and terror. But their strategy required controlling specific locations, and Williams made sure there were no strategic points to control. Every building could be abandoned, and every tunnel could become a trap. When Zephyrian ground forces landed at New Geneva, they found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to stand still and be destroyed. Human defenders would attack supply, convoys, sabotage equipment, and then vanish into mining tunnels that the aliens could not navigate effectively. The Zephyrians had superior weapons and armor, but they could not use their advantages against enemies they could not find. The space battle above New Geneva proved equally frustrating for War Prime Velthak. Captain Ben Rodriguez arrived with a hastily assembled flotilla of converted cargo ships and mining vessels. The Zephyrian commander dismissed these craft as worthless civilian vessels that would be destroyed in minutes. Rodriguez proved him wrong by using tactics that no military academy had ever taught. The human ships scattered throughout the asteroid field surrounding New Geneva, using their superior knowledge of local space to avoid direct confrontation. Instead of fighting like a proper fleet, they acted like a pack of hunters, striking at Zephyrian supply ships and support vessels before disappearing among the asteroids. Rodriguez's crews had spent years navigating these dangerous fields, and they used every trick they knew to turn the environment into an ally. The aliens found themselves chasing shadows. Every time they moved to attack one human ship, 3 others would appear from different directions to hit their flanks or rear. The Zephyrians had powerful shields and devastating weapons, but they could not bring their firepower to bear on enemies that refused to fight a conventional battle. Their massive dreadnoughts were too large and slow to chase the smaller human craft through narrow asteroid passages. War Prime Velthak realized with growing frustration that his intelligence about human military capabilities had been completely wrong. These creatures were not fighting as individuals, but as some kind of collective organism. Ships separated by millions of kilometers were coordinating their attacks with impossible precision. Ground forces and space units were sharing information and supporting each other in ways that defied everything the aliens understood about military organization. The battle for New Geneva lasted 6 days instead of the 6 hours Velthak had predicted. When his forces finally captured the main settlement, they found it empty except for booby traps and mocking messages left by the human defenders. The colonists had evacuated through tunnels the Zephyrians never found, taking most of their equipment and all of their determination to keep fighting. The aliens had won a worthless prize at the cost of significant casualties and damaged equipment. Engineer Kelly Thompson monitored the battle from her position aboard the converted cargo vessel Lucky Strike. She had spent the preparation week developing new targeting systems that could turn human numerical inferiority into precision strikes against alien weak points. Thompson's innovations allowed smaller human ships to identify and exploit gaps in Zephyrian shields and armor. Her work was already being transmitted to other human vessels throughout the colonies. The pattern established at New Geneva repeated itself across human space. At Titan Base, Captain Steve Collins and his mining crews held off Zephyrian assault forces for over a week, using industrial equipment as weapons. At the agricultural colony on Kepler 438b, farmers used their knowledge of local terrain to conduct guerrilla warfare that left alien forces bogged down in endless skirmishes. Every human settlement became a trap that cost the Zephyrians time, resources, and confidence. War Prime Velthak found himself facing something that had never happened in his military career: an enemy that became more dangerous the longer the egg fighting continued. Human forces were learning from every engagement, adapting their tactics faster than his commanders could respond. Worse yet, they seemed to be enjoying the challenge. Intercepted human communications revealed troops joking about alien weaknesses and competing to see who could destroy more enemy equipment. The most disturbing development for the Zephyrian commander was the realization that humans were not just defending their colonies. They were using the battles as training exercises, learning how to fight an enemy with superior technology. Every engagement taught them more about Zephyrian capabilities and limitations. The aliens were inadvertently creating exactly the kind of experienced, motivated enemy they could least afford to face. After 2 months of fighting in the outer colonies, Velthak was forced to admit that his easy conquest had become a grinding campaign with no end in sight. Human resistance was growing stronger instead of weaker, and reports from his field commanders painted an increasingly grim picture. The creatures his scientists had dismissed as weak and fragmented were proving to be the most dangerous enemy the Zephyrian Empire had ever encountered. The War Prime sent a request for reinforcements back to the Zephyrian homeworlds, the first time in his career that he had needed to ask for help during a conquest. He was beginning to understand that his empire had made a terrible mistake, but he did not yet realize just how terrible that mistake would prove to be. 6 months after the first shots were fired, the Zephyrian Empire faced something that had never happened in their history of conquest, an enemy that was getting stronger during wartime instead of weaker. War Prime Velthak stood in his command, center reviewing reports that painted an increasingly impossible picture. Human industrial output had not collapsed under alien attack as expected. Instead, it had exploded beyond anything his analysts thought possible. General Frank Patterson coordinated the defense of Luna Station, where humanity had begun the most ambitious construction project in their history. The Moon's factories, originally designed to build cargo ships and mining equipment, had been completely converted to military production. But the scale of the operation defied Zephyrian understanding of how manufacturing was supposed to work during wartime. Human shipyards were not just maintaining production levels despite the war, they were increasing output every single month. The aliens watched in disbelief as human construction techniques evolved in real time. Where the Zephyrians built ships using traditional methods that took months or years, humans had developed modular construction systems that could assemble vessels in weeks. Entire fleets were being built using standardized components that could be manufactured on different worlds and assembled wherever they were needed. It was like watching an entire species transform itself into a single massive war machine. Dr. Carol Hughes led the scientific effort to reverse engineer captured Zephyrian technology, working in laboratories that never shut down. Her research teams had discovered something that the aliens had never expected. Humans could function effectively with minimal sleep and under extreme stress for extended periods. While Zephyrian scientists needed regular rest and optimal working conditions, human researchers were making breakthrough discoveries while running on caffeine and determination. The breakthrough came when Hughes and her team successfully decoded the principles behind Zephyrian shield technology. Within weeks, human engineers had not only duplicated the alien systems, but had begun improving them. The improvements were typically human. Instead of creating perfect shields like the aliens used, they built cheaper, more replaceable versions that could be mass-produced and installed on smaller ships. Quality was less important than quantity when you could build 10 ships for every one the enemy could produce. Captain Alex Turner's deep space reconnaissance mission had been planned as a suicide run, but it became the turning point of the war. Turner and his crew spent 3 weeks cramped inside a modified scout ship, surviving on minimal food and water while tracking Zephyrian fleet movements. The mission required the kind of endurance that Zephyrian crews simply could not match. Their larger, more comfortable ships needed regular resupply and maintenance breaks that human vessels could do without. Turner's discovery of the main Zephyrian Staging area at Wolf 359 gave humanity its first real strategic target. The alien fleet had established a massive logistics base there, confident that no human force could threaten it. They had positioned the base only 2 light-years from Earth, close enough to support their invasion but far enough to be safe from human retaliation. Turner's crew spent days mapping the base's defenses and supply routes, gathering intelligence that would change the course of the war. The information Turner brought back revealed something crucial about Zephyrian military organization. The aliens were excellent at using overwhelming force against weaker enemies, but they had never learned to adapt when their initial strategy failed. Their command structure was rigid and hierarchical, designed for quick conquests rather than extended campaigns. When their plans went wrong, they struggled to develop new approaches. Human forces began pushing back against Zephyrian positions throughout the outer colonies. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to learn from every engagement and improve with every battle. Human tactics evolved constantly, incorporating lessons from each skirmish and adapting to new situations faster than Zephyrian commanders could respond. It was like fighting an enemy that became smarter and more dangerous every day. Admiral Clark realized that humanity's greatest advantage was not any single weapon or technology, but their ability to function as a unified organism during crisis. The same emotional bonds and pack loyalty that the aliens had identified as weakness were proving to be humanity's greatest strength. Human crews would fight to the death to protect each other, and human colonies would sacrifice everything to buy time for other settlements to prepare their defenses. The Zephyrians began experiencing something they had never encountered before: fear. Their previous conquests had been straightforward affairs, where superior technology guaranteed victory. Against humans, technology was not enough. The creatures seemed capable of turning any tool into a weapon, any setback into a learning experience, and any defeat into motivation for revenge. They were not just fighting a war, they were evolving during combat. War Prime Velthak received reports that made no sense according to everything his empire knew about warfare. Human industrial capacity was now producing more ships per month than entire Zephyrian worlds could manufacture in a year. Human crews were operating effectively after months of continuous combat, while his own forces needed frequent rotation to maintain combat effectiveness. Most disturbing of all, human morale was actually improving as the war continued, while Zephyrian forces were showing signs of exhaustion and doubt. The alien commander was forced to acknowledge that his invasion had awakened something terrible. The humans his scientists had dismissed as weak and divided had revealed themselves to be something else entirely, a species that thrived on conflict and became stronger under pressure. They were not just defending their territory. They were transforming into something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain Tony Baker led a strike force of mixed military and civilian vessels against a Zephyrian supply convoy near the Proxima Centauri system. His fleet included everything from battleships to converted passenger liners, all crewed by volunteers who had never served in the military before the war began. Teachers served as communications officers. Accountants managed logistics, and farmers piloted combat vessels with deadly efficiency. The entire human species had become a military force. The attack on the supply convoy demonstrated the complete integration of human society into the war effort. Baker's forces destroyed twice their number in enemy ships using tactics that combined formal military doctrine with improvised strategies developed by civilian crews. The Zephyrians were not just fighting the human military, they were fighting an entire civilization that had decided survival was non-negotiable. As the war entered its second year, Velthak realized that his empire faced something unprecedented. An enemy that was not weakening under assault, but growing stronger with every passing day. The humans were no longer the fragile, divided species his scientists had studied. They had become something new, something dangerous, and something that would not stop fighting until either they or their enemies were completely destroyed. The war entered its most dangerous phase when Admiral Clark launched Operation Wolfpack, the most ambitious military campaign in human history. The plan required perfect coordination across dozens of star systems, with hundreds of ship captains, acting in precise timing despite being separated by light years of space. The Zephyrians had never seen anything like it, because no species they had conquered possessed the combination of technology, discipline, and desperate courage needed to attempt such an operation. Clark's strategy was brutally simple: cut off the main Zephyrian fleet from their home territory by simultaneously striking at supply lines, communication relays, and staging areas across multiple systems. The operation would require human forces to attack targets that were heavily defended, often outnumbered, and far from any hope of reinforcement. It was the kind of plan that could only work if every single unit performed their mission perfectly, and if the enemy failed to adapt quickly enough to counter the coordinated assault. Commander Tony Baker received his assignment 3 days before the operation began: destroy the main Zephyrian fuel depot at Proxima Station with a mixed force of military vessels and armed civilian ships. Baker looked at his fleet and saw accountants who had volunteered to serve as logistics coordinators, teachers who had trained as communications officers, and farmers who now piloted combat vessels with the same steady determination they had once used to tend crops. The complete integration of human society into the war effort had created something the galaxy had never seen before. Baker's fleet approached Proxima Station using a route that took them through 3 asteroid fields and past 2 Zephyrian patrol zones. The journey required navigation skills that only civilian pilots possessed, combined with combat readiness that only military training could provide. His mixed crews demonstrated the flexibility that had become humanity's greatest weapon: the ability to combine different types of expertise into solutions that no traditional military could match. The attack on Proxima Station began at exactly 0300 ship time, synchronized with simultaneous strikes across human space. Baker's forces used tactics that would have been impossible for a conventional fleet. Cargo ships loaded with explosives rammed into shield generators while fighters provided cover. Civilian vessels with improvised weapon systems targeted supply. Convoys while military ships engaged the main defenses. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of proper warfare. War Prime Veltak watched the coordinated human assault unfold with growing horror. His strategic displays showed attacks happening simultaneously at 17 different locations, each one precisely timed to maximize damage to Zephyrian logistics and communications. The humans were not just fighting individual battles. They were executing a single massive operation that stretched across their entire region of space. The level of coordination required was beyond anything his empire had thought possible for such a primitive species. The aliens discovered that their rigid command structure, which had served them well during quick conquests, became a fatal weakness against human tactics. When Zephyrian commanders tried to respond to the coordinated attacks, they found that their communication networks were being systematically destroyed. Human forces had identified and targeted every relay station, command post, and supply depot that kept the alien fleet functioning as a unified force. Captain Grace Murphy led the most dangerous mission of Operation Wolfpack, a direct assault on the Zephyrian command ship during the Battle of Wolf 359. Her volunteers piloted small craft in a coordinated swarm attack that used tactics adapted from ancient human naval warfare but scaled up to space combat. The Zephyrians had never encountered anything like the swarm tactics humans employed, where dozens of small ships attacked from all directions simultaneously. Murphy's assault craft were converted civilian vessels, barely armed and completely outmatched by Zephyrian technology. But they had advantages the aliens could not counter. Human pilots who had grown up playing video games that taught them to think in 3 dimensions. Engineers who could keep damaged systems running long after they should have failed, and crews who would rather die than let their teammates down. The emotional bonds that connected human crews turned individual ships into parts of a larger organism. The swarm attack on the Zephyrian command ship demonstrated something that terrified War Prime. Velthak more than any weapon could. Humans fought like predators. They identified the most important target, coordinated their assault to overwhelm its defenses, and pressed their attack even when taking heavy casualties. Most alien species fought defensively, trying to minimize losses while achieving objectives. Humans fought to kill, accepting losses as long as they inflicted greater damage on their enemies. Velthak realized that his empire was facing something unprecedented in their history of conquest. The humans were not just another species defending their territory. They were apex predators who had been hiding their true nature behind a facade of civilization. Their internal conflicts had not been signs of weakness, but training for the ultimate conflict. Every war in human history had been preparation for this moment, when they would face an external enemy that threatened their entire species. The coordinated attacks of Operation Wolfpack achieved something that shocked both sides. They worked. Within 72 hours, the main Zephyrian fleet found itself cut off from reinforcements, low on supplies, and facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Human forces had turned their supposed chaotic nature into a tactical advantage, making decisions and changing strategies with a speed that overwhelmed Zephyrian planning cycles. Captain Roy Henderson commanded the strike force that captured the critical supply depot at Alpha Centauri, cutting the main supply line between the Zephyrian fleet and their home territory. His crews included former corporate executives who managed logistics with ruthless efficiency, retired teachers who coordinated complex operations with the same patience they had once used to educate children, and mechanics who kept captured alien equipment running better than its original operators had managed. The success of Operation Wolfpack marked the moment when the war's momentum shifted permanently in humanity's favor. The Zephyrians began to understand that they were not fighting a conventional enemy, but something far more dangerous, a species that had evolved to survive on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Their weaknesses were actually the traits of ultimate survivors: pack cooperation, endurance, adaptability, and the absolute refusal to surrender no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. War Prime Velthak sent desperate messages to his home, Worlds, requesting immediate reinforcements and warning that the human species posed a threat unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. But his communications were being intercepted by human intelligence services, who were already planning their next move. The aliens had taught humanity valuable lessons about space warfare, and now their students were ready to graduate to more advanced subjects. The Zephyrian Empire, which had conquered 47 worlds through overwhelming force and quick victories, found itself trapped in an extended campaign against an enemy that grew stronger with every battle. They had awakened something that should have remained dormant, a species of natural-born killers who had been restraining themselves only because they had no worthy opponents. Now they had found enemies worthy of their full attention, and the galaxy would never be the same. The final battle of the war began when Admiral Clark arrived at the Zeta Reticuli system with the largest human fleet ever assembled. Over 3,000 vessels stretched across space, ranging from massive battleships built in the orbital shipyards of Luna to converted pleasure craft crewed by civilian volunteers who had never left their home systems before the war began. Every ship flew the same message painted on their hulls. They wanted to see what humans do when cornered. Today, they learn what happens when we are not. War Prime Velthak watched the human fleet approach and finally understood the magnitude of his empire's mistake. The creatures his scientists had dismissed as weak and fragmented had become something the galaxy had never seen before, an entire species transformed into a single military organism. The fleet advancing toward his position represented not just human military might, but the collective will of billions of people who had decided that their enemies would not survive this encounter. The Zephyrian commander had positioned his remaining forces in what should have been an impregnable defensive position around a gas giant with multiple moons that could serve as fortress bases. His fleet still possessed technological advantages, and his defensive positions had been carefully chosen to maximize the effectiveness of alien weapons while minimizing human tactical flexibility. Vel'Thak had learned enough about human capabilities to know that this would not be an easy battle, but he believed his superior technology would finally prove decisive. Captain Roy Henderson led the advance force that would test Zephyrian defenses and identify weak points for the main assault. His ships moved through the outer system like a pack of wolves, probing enemy positions and drawing fire to reveal hidden weapon emplacements. Henderson's crews had spent months studying captured Zephyrian equipment and battle recordings, learning to think like their enemies in order to defeat them more effectively. The initial skirmishes revealed something that chilled Vel'Thak to his core. Human forces were no longer just adapting to Zephyrian tactics, but actively predicting them. Every defensive move his commanders made was countered before it could be fully implemented. The humans had learned to read Zephyrian behavior patterns and were using that knowledge to stay one step ahead of alien strategy. It was like fighting an enemy that could see the future. Dr. Carol Hughes monitored the battle from the command ship, analyzing real-time data from human vessels engaged with enemy forces. Her teams had spent the war years studying every aspect of Zephyrian technology and psychology, building a comprehensive understanding of how their enemies thought and fought. Hughes realized that the aliens were trapped by their own success. 47 previous conquests had taught them that overwhelming force always worked, so they had never learned to adapt when it failed. The main assault began when Admiral Clark gave the signal that would be remembered throughout human history. All ships, weapons free, show them what happens when you threaten our pack. 3,000 human vessels attacked simultaneously, using tactics that combined everything they had learned during 2 years of constant warfare. The assault was not just a military operation, but a demonstration of what humans became when their survival was threatened. Human swarm tactics, perfected during countless smaller engagements, overwhelmed Zephyrian defensive systems that had been designed to stop conventional fleet attacks. Thousands of small craft swarmed over alien positions like angry insects, each one individually weak but collectively devastating. The Zephyrians found their mighty dreadnoughts surrounded by clouds of human fighters that could strike from any direction and disappear before defensive weapons could respond. War Prime Vel'Thak watched his carefully planned defense collapse as human forces demonstrated the ultimate evolution of their pack-hunting instincts. Individual ships sacrificed themselves to create openings for others. Crews accepted certain death to complete missions that would save their teammates, and entire squadrons coordinated their attacks with the precision of a single mind controlling multiple bodies. The aliens were not fighting individual humans, but a collective consciousness that valued the pack's survival above any individual life. The breakthrough came when Captain Murphy's strike force penetrated the Zephyrian command center, using the same swarm tactics that had worked throughout the war but refined to perfection. Her ships moved through alien defenses like water flowing around rocks, each vessel following a path that complemented every other ship's movement. The coordination required was beyond anything the Zephyrians had thought possible, but humans had been practicing this kind of teamwork since childhood through sports, games, and group activities. Vel'Thak realized that his empire had made the most fundamental error possible in warfare. They had mistaken restraint for weakness. Humans had not been showing their limitations during peacetime. They had been concealing their capabilities. The same traits that made them seem weak in peaceful situations, emotional bonds, pack loyalty, willingness to sacrifice for others, made them unstoppable in warfare. They had evolved as cooperative hunters on a world that tried to kill them every day, and now they were applying those survival skills against alien enemies. The battle turned into a rout as Zephyrian forces, demoralized by months of defeats and facing an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every engagement, began surrendering en masse. Those who did not surrender fled the galaxy entirely, carrying warnings about the Deathworld apex predators that humanity had revealed itself to be. War Prime Velthak, in his final transmission before his own surrender, sent a message to every alien civilization within communication range. Beware the humans. They are not what they appear to be. The aftermath of the battle transformed humanity's position in the galaxy overnight. Other alien species who had been monitoring the war between the Zephyrians and what they assumed was a primitive species suddenly found themselves facing a new reality. The humans were not victims but victors, not prey but predators, and they now controlled the most advanced military force in their region of space. Diplomatic missions from 3 different alien civilizations arrived at Earth within months, all requesting peaceful trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. Admiral Clark received reports from deep space, monitoring stations that other alien empires were actively avoiding human territory and warning their ships to maintain respectful distances from human vessels. The galaxy had learned the lesson that the Zephyrians learned too late. Never mistake human restraint for human weakness. The same species that had been dismissed as fragile and divided had proven themselves to be the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever produced. Dr. Ross completed her post-war analysis with observations that would reshape galactic understanding of human nature. The aliens had been wrong about everything. Human diversity was not chaos but strength. Human emotions were not weakness but motivation. And human mortality did not make them desperate but determined. Most importantly, human civilization was not a limitation on their capabilities, but a choice they made when they had no worthy enemies to fight. Captain Morrison, now promoted to admiral, received the first reports of contact with new alien civilizations. All 3 species had specifically requested peaceful relations and had gone out of their way to demonstrate non-hostile intentions. The galaxy had learned that humans were not prey to be hunted, but apex predators that had been sleeping. Now that they were awake, every intelligent species in the region understood that cooperation was much safer than conflict. Humanity had not just won a war. They had established themselves as the dominant power in their corner of the galaxy, and everyone else was very careful to stay on their good side.